Still waiting.
I'm quoting now.
Okay. So this is a talk I did a couple of years ago. I figured keep it light, keep it entertaining. So I have a number of stories, being almost 20 years in the industry with various customers, regulators, everything like that. Just thought I'd share a couple of those interesting stories that I experienced with this. So first off, we're going to hit regulators. So how many here have had the pleasure of working with the FFIEC? Examiners, all that stuff. They are a special breed of people. Let's just put it that way. A couple of companies ago, I was a head of GRC for Diebold, and we were considered a critical service provider to the financial industry. So with that, we get the pleasure roped in to, take part of the examinations. And, if you're not familiar with it, especially as a service provider in the industry, they pull everybody in. The OCC, the FDIC, the NCUA, state examiners, everybody gets to participate in this. And they go through, if you ever looked at the booklets, they're basically written so that they can make up what they want, for what to enforce with you. They're paragraph driven, not very well broken down, everything like that. So we had, I'd say, month-long examination there. They, tearing apart our policies, interviewing a whole bunch of people and everything. Well, one of the times the lead examiner was coming in from lunch or something like that. Coming in, I was meeting him at the door at the reception area. And there was something on the news, basically, that, there was something like solar flares happening. Every now and then there'll be something like, hey, there's activity of solar flares. There might be some satellite disruption, everything like that. So he comes in, and he's like, hey, Justin, I just saw on the news that there's some solar flare activity. I was like, yeah, I saw that while I was reading some of the news at lunch and everything. He's like, what does Diebold do to monitor for solar flares, and how do you protect against that? And so me, as kind of my free care, attitude, I'm like, that's great, And then he didn't laugh back. And I'm like, oh, you're serious about that right now? And kind of gave me that blank look and everything. He was kind of like a Ben Stein, didn't really laugh at all with that. So I'm trying to hold back, even laughing worse out of this. And I was like, all right, let me get with my BCP team. I'll be back with this. I go upstairs to my team and some of the other people. I'm like, guys, you will not believe the question I just got asked. And we had a great time. We're like, should we wrap our servers in tinfoil? What will be acceptable mitigation for this? And we made some stuff up and everything, but it was just one of those things. It was just kind of crazy. My next regulator story that deals with the NCUA. And I've been in and out of consulting, managing security programs, consulting on them. One of the things, and this is pre-Trusted Sec, we did a number of virtual CISO stuff, help companies actually kind of manage and, handle different audits and everything like that. And I was contracting with a credit union. Literally the smallest credit union possible. They had a one-branch credit union in the middle of this farm field. You can't get any smaller than that in the financial area. Well, they brought us in. They had major problems with one of their NCUA examiners. And I got to see some of the reports and everything, and this was the main reason why, I came in to help him out. He wanted, first off, a plan in case a helicopter would crash into their one branch and then people wouldn't get access to it. Additionally, he wanted a plan that if all the roads were closed, that the main owner would be able to still come into the branch. So she literally had to take a picture of her bike in her garage to put it into evidence to say, here's how it would come into this. She was explaining to me, she's like, if all the roads are closed, we're not opening. That's just not a thing that's happening with this. So, if anybody has to deal with regulars, it's an awesome thing with that. So, another thing, and who wants a Dave Kennedy story?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Is it a new one?
It happened in the past, so I don't know what that means. But it's an entertaining one. So, obviously, Diebold, Dave and I work together with this. And with that, we have a number of different customers coming in asking us, what are you doing with their information? How are you securing it? And everything like that. And that was my team that primarily dealt with this. And Dave, every now and then comes in, especially if it's a bigger customer, obviously being the CISO, just kind of making an appearance. So he's in there, he's working on his laptop, we're handling all the questions and everything. And one of the kind of assessors that were there for this company, we're talking about a couple of different things, and social engineering came up. And, he's already made set, kind of a known expert in and around this space and everything. And he's like, Dave, do you know about social engineering? Looking over to him. And Dave, he's like, yeah, I do. He's like, let me tell you about social engineering. Social engineering is the act of engineering people. And he's explaining this to Dave Kennedy here, as we're doing this. And I'm, again, holding back all the laughter I can with this, with it. And Dave was obviously professional and all that stuff, but it was so funny, Dave being mansplained what social engineering was by this customer. Then he goes on, he's like, yeah, I kind of wrote this tool that does this. And then he goes into, launches up all his VMs that everybody has seen, when he does the demos. He's like, yeah, let me show you this. Here's how I compromise it just by an email. And the guy that was in charge of kind of the vendor risk management program for this big bank, he's like, wow, that is really cool. I have no idea what you did there, but it looked really cool, with this. Yeah, it was pretty entertaining. Like, Dave and I have had good relationships and working, obviously, working at Trusted Sec here, but sometimes you get customers that they don't know exactly the industry we're in and start, they're excited about and everything, which was great. Let's see, what other stories I have? So this is one, consulting with this, and pre-Trusted Sec, again, back in older consulting days. And one of the things that we do a lot is looking at programs, so helping them compare to whatever framework it is, looking at all the multitudes and everything like that. So I go into this one company, they're kind of construction industry type of thing. So smaller IT footprint, but still hundreds of employees and everything like that. So we're going in, kind of help them, measuring against all these different baselines and everything. The one thing that's kind of off topic, I walk into the IT manager's office here. It looked like an all-purpose storage room. You couldn't even walk straight to his desk. You had to go around the stacks of paper and books and hardware and everything like that. You couldn't even sit down in his office. It was just stacked to the brim of stuff, like hoarder, with that. But anyway, we were talking. I don't really have not a lot of policy, not a lot of baselining, everything. Fine. We work with a number of customers with that. Later, I was talking with the CIO of business continuity, and we were talking about it and what they're doing with that and how they were backing up and all that stuff. And he goes in and he says, Justin, I see one of your topics is policies and procedures. I was like, yeah, that's right. You don't really have a lot. You have an employee handbook, but that's about it. And he's like, yeah, we have policies. I was like, oh, okay. I wasn't aware of that. He reaches into his desk drawer, pulls out a folder called Auditing, and lays it in front of me. I open it up, and they're beautiful policies, well written, well articulated content. It's full of, of the stuff you're expecting to look out of that. And I'm flipping through, it's like, wow, these are great policies. Are they implemented in here? He's like, oh no, they'd be too expensive to implement here. and of course, I'm like, writing my notes, I was like, these policies are definitely copied from somewhere, type of thing. It was. And again, trying to hold back laughter, being professional, and but yeah, it's pretty funny with that. All right, how about a PCI story here? And it's not one from being a QSA, but on the other side of the table, we're being audited by a QSA. So a part of that at Diebold, we actually had a number of stuff where we actually manage cardholder data for customers. So once a year, getting a whole PCI audit so we can attest to that as a service provider. The QSA came in, and back in the day especially, they were less required to be certified and less required to be knowledgeable. So this guy came more from the physical security end of it, which is fine, but when we were dealing with mainframes, he was way out of his depth. Didn't know one way from another from talking about mainframes, and that was where a lot of our cardholder data was. So we bring in the engineer to talk to him, start talking about How are you encrypting it? How are you, keeping it secure, all that stuff. And this guy wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed. And both of them were talking and everything. And the QSA asked, can you show me where card holder data is stored on the mainframe? It's pretty straightforward answer. Very typical QSA. The guy in charge says, I can't show you where cardholder data is stored. It could be anywhere on the platter that cardholder data is actually stored on this. And the QSA was kind of lost. He's like, oh, and just kind of fell quiet. I'm on the other side of the table. I'm like this. I'm like, I think he means the file path where the cardholder data is actually at. So I had to explain. He's like, yeah, that's what I mean. And he's like, oh, yeah, I can show you that. So, yeah, it's sometimes you kind of have to lead people through what you think is what you expect. Another QSA story. I love QSA stories. And this is by a very large QSA company. I won't name names, but they're kind of really big in the industry. So my last company at Gift Cards, we were both a card issuer, like we stored track data because we're printing mag-stripe cards going out of our building. Plus we dealt with millions upon millions of transactions to load up all the cards. So we sold money, essentially, from that. And so we basically had a rock that basically covered both the service provider aspect and the merchant side of it. So both sides of this. The QSA came in literally for 2 hours. That's it. For all this stuff, he came in literally for 2 hours. And one of the things, as we just mentioned, he asked about where you store cardholder data. I was like, okay, great. I'll pull up the database and let's take a look at cardholder data. And, bring it up. It was a MariaDB, so MySQL kind of base and everything, and had a tool that basically loaded up and all the tables. And where we stored cardholder data, it was all that binary kind of rendering. So it was all the weird characters and everything like that. It was like, as you can see here, unless you can, and of course I'm being funny here, unless you can read wingdings, you won't be able to read this card data. And the QSA said to me, oh, that's wingdings there? And I'm like, no, that's binary data trying to be rendered on the screen. So after he left, after 2 hours, I went into our IT office. I was like, guys, I got a great new solution. We're going to switch all of our card data to wingdings, and that's our encryption strategy from now on. Nobody will know, type of thing. So, yeah, it's always entertaining with that. Any more? And I have some other stories. They take a little bit longer to kind of go through, but we'll call it for a talk. Any questions? I don't know if you have any questions for me. Yeah. Yes. It did work very well. Of course, we didn't spend a lot of money on our QSAs, and I think that was purposeful. So, all right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great conference.
Justin Leapline, everybody.